My last tip for the HiSET exam is to read the questions before you read the passage. Chances are that the questions will give you a hint for what to look for as you read, and oftentimes, especially on the reading test, the questions are kind of in order in terms of following along the same order as the passage. So you might be able to just answer the questions as you read. Let me give you an example here. So before I start reading this long passage about dandelions, I'm going to go ahead and just read some of the questions. And no, I'm not going to read every single one of the options for all the questions. I'm just going to read the question and maybe look at the options if I think I need to. So, number 1, the comparison of dandelions to grandma's collages emphasizes. Okay, if you're like, I have no idea what dandelions and collages, I don't know what's going on. Neither do I. But I'm noticing collages. That's kind of a specific detail, and I will keep my eye out for that detail, and when I see it, I'll come back to this question. Okay, number 2. As it is used in line 9, the word ritual means. Okay, when I get to line 9 and I see ritual, I'm going to stop and answer that question. Number 3. When the narrator and Margaret decipher traces of their lives in the clouds, they are... Alright, so when I see deciphering traces of their lives in the clouds, something like that, I will stop and answer this question. Number 4. All of these excerpts use language that supports the idea that youth is fleeting except. And in this case, I can see that the excerpts that they have are in the options and not necessarily referring back to a specific part of the passage, so I probably can answer that one without looking at the passage. Number 5, how is the last paragraph organized? Well, of course, for that one, I'm going to need to look at the last paragraph, so I'll wait until I get to the end to answer that question. And finally, which phrase best describes the relationship between the narrator and Margaret? Okay, so that's an overall arching question. It sounds like a thematic or a character-based question, so I'm going to guess that I need to read the whole thing before I'm prepared to answer that question. So let's go up to the top. I'm reading, and suddenly as I come to this second paragraph, I stumble across the word collages. I stop because that raises a flag to me that I'm ready to answer question number 1. And so now I can look at collages and look at question number 1 and answer it at this time. Then I keep reading, and along I come to line number 9. I know it's line 9 because it has a line guide along the side here where it says the line, and here's line 10, so right before it must be line 9. And here's the word ritual, which is the word that it mentions in the question. So now I know that that's where I need to look to answer that question. Number 3, when the narrator and Margaret decipher traces of their lives in the clouds. Okay, so I'm getting to that section. Now I'm ready to answer that question. I might answer this question at this point and then keep reading, and I read to the very end, and then I examine the last paragraph to answer number 5, and now I can think about the passage as a whole to answer number 6. And so I've been answering questions as I go through the passage, and that's much more time efficient, and it also makes sure that I'm looking directly at the passage for my answers and not just making guesses. When I go to another test, for example, the science test or sometimes the social studies test, I might actually read some of the passage or some of the information before looking at the question. The reason for this is that in this example, I might not really have enough background to understand what the question is asking, and the question might be too confusing or too difficult for me to wrap my brain around without having a little bit of background. So for this one, I would go ahead and read these couple of paragraphs, just get an idea of what's going on, and then read the questions. But I'm definitely going to read the questions before I look at this table, because tables and charts are really an overwhelming amount of information, and it really helps to have the question to kind of focus my attention on one aspect of it, and kind of saves me a lot of time. So after reading this introductory information, I'm going to read these questions. For example, in the time period presented, which drought classification were the percentages of affected areas and regions E and F most similar? Okay, so I already have a little bit of background that I read about how this is about drought and different regions, and the regions are called E and F. So I have that background, and now I have a little bit of an idea of what I want to look at. So now I can look at the chart and be a little bit more focused on, okay, here's region E, here's region F, here are the different drought classifications, and I can look at them and compare to answer number 11. So that's an example of how I would go about answering the question, reading the question first and letting that focus my attention for when I look at charts and graphs. And this is slightly different than what I reviewed with the reading test, which is that I will probably just read the question first and then answer the questions as I go through the passage. So in summary, these are some of my tips and tricks for the HiSET exam. Really, the most important thing, if you walk away with anything, is number one, to answer all of the questions, no matter what. It does not matter if you are completely guessing and just putting C for all the questions you don't know. It does not hurt to answer the questions, and you have at least a 25% chance of getting it right. So you might as well take that chance and fill in an answer. And number two is keep a positive attitude. Never shame yourself for not knowing an answer or being confused by a question. It just doesn't help. Just keep moving, use your logic, use your reason, make guesses, make educated guesses where you can, and don't let those voices of shame and doubt creep into your mind. Whenever they do, if you need a phrase or a word, just kind of recenter you, like just give yourself a little bit of grace, put all of that to the side and focus on the task at hand, and there's just no telling what you can do. So now those are some of my tips and tricks for the HiSET exam, and I know that you can do it.